Hello and welcome to another episode of The Defenders on Sunset TV. And in this episode, we are going to look at the extremely important decision and a set of decisions by the Ministry of Defense, which has led to a sudden spurt of approvals by the Defense Acquisition Council against the acceptance of necessity to buy a whole range of military platforms and systems that some would argue are in the range of $8.5 billion. It's unusual because this kind of approvals normally are very time consuming and go on for years. But there's clearly a desire on the part of the ministry to equip our armed forces with the best and the most capable equipment in the light of the fact that our threat perceptions indicate very clearly that the China threat and the Pakistan threat are going to remain and they are not going to ease down, allowing us a window to weigh our choices. And we have with us Air Vice Marshal O.P. Tiwari, who will throw light on the Air Force element, and in the light of the fact that the Air Force is a top importer of platforms even now and a top acquirer of platforms within India. And we have Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, who has come often on the show, doesn't need too much of an introduction, but a man with considerable experience which will help us understand that why is there an increasing focus on the Navy and its acquisitions, considering the fact that Navy has been on the forefront of the three services to integrate and build its own platforms and is doing that systematically and increasingly so with more and more Indian and indigenized equipment. So I'll ask you, Admiral Sir, this defense acquisition process and the acquisition because of necessity, since you have been in the Integrated Defense Headquarters, IDS headquarters, how is it any different from the acquisitions we've been making in the past? And where does the naval element come into the whole process of acquisitions?
Maruf, thank you for getting me on your show. The Defense Acquisition Council, the composition is same what it was. It's chaired by the Honorable Raksha Mantri and the Rajya Raksha Mantri, the three chiefs and all the secretary level officers of the Department of Defense, DP, the executive, the DMA, the scientific advisor, DRDO and what have you, Coast Guard, and also the Defense Finance. And the CISC is the one of the members. And Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, he is the member secretary who does all the so-called the secretarial support. Now what it does is that before a proposal comes to Defense Acquisition Council, it has to go through two stages in the IDS headquarters, the Integrated Defense Staff headquarters, of which now the CDS is the head, but primarily the CISC has got all the tasks, the Chief of Integrated Defense Staff. And the proposal comes from service headquarters and they make a presentation. Before the presentation is done, IDS headquarters has got very high caliber professionals who do the vetting of the proposal to see whether it can be built in India or if it is to be bought from outside, as to what will be the category of this. You know, will it be buy India, will it be, buy from foreign vendor, or will it be buy some from foreign vendor and manufacture here? So that categorization committee, there is a committee which is headed by the deputy chief, and once it is cleared and categorized, then it comes to higher committee. A higher committee is chaired by the CISC, and all the vice chiefs are member, and the additional secretary of the Department of Defense, various departments. And once they find it fit, and once they find that yes, it will fit into the budget allotted to that particular service, only then he forwards it to the Defense Acquisition Council. So rightly speaking, what is cleared by the IDS headquarters should see through the Defense Acquisition Council, unless There are some larger reasons which the IDS headquarters is not familiar with, because there can be so many political reasons, you know. So we leave it to the Honorable Raksha Mantri and the three chiefs who sit on the board. So this is the process. The process has not changed. Now, why there is so much of you just mentioned, and rightly so, the flurry of activity. The reason is, Maruf, that the once it is given the AON, the acceptance of necessity, now it is valid for 1 year.
Okay.
If you are not able to start the process of RFP, request for proposal, within 1 year, then that AON will lapse. And then you have to resubmit to the DSC, following by and large the same procedure.
Okay, so well explained, sir. And after the acceptance of necessity is given, add another 5 years at least, 352 weeks plus minus, before the acquisition process is fully completed to be implemented on ground. I'll come back to you with one or two other questions.
Sure.
Air Marshal, sir. Now, the Air Force list of desires includes lots of long-range standoff weapons, particularly to be used with the Sukhoi fighters, which are the mainstay of the IAF. What is it that they want now which the Sukhoi did not have?
Maruf, thanks for getting me onto this channel. See, basically our target, Air Force, basically our aim is to safeguard against China and Pakistan. China, you know that Air Force, if had played major role in 62, if it had, results would have been different. Now think that as far Air Force is concerned, we have got geographical advantage over the Chinese Air Force. Like all our air bases are at the sea level, they can get airborne with the full armament load and don't have to fly much to reach ROC and deliver the goods and come back. Now that is not sufficient. We want to drop or to target deep inside the strategic bases and tactical bases to neutralize China if war comes up. So for that, such equipments as the long range standoff missile system is required, which we have to have Su-30.
What is long range?
Long range, sir, now it is this what it has been gone through in the last execution commit. It's a not long range, it's a medium range, but finally to get integrated with the naval system which is already being procured. Sinha sir will throw more light on that. So system is basically the idea was created so that our requirement should be integrated and it should not go in a different direction. So that Navy or Army, so that your input cost or more time to prepare can be cut down. We work towards one target, maybe slight changes at later on, get a desired result. This will reduce the input cost and efficiency and the time again. Like you are saying that it will take 4 to 5 years. Like time has to be reduced, because if you have to wait for such a long period, then we cannot be a threat to the China. And the basic factor has to counter. If you have to grow, India has to grow, we have to counter, I have to be able to assist.
Okay, so acquisition, especially in the immediate near future, has to be of the sort that while R&D is taking place, while indigenous production is taking place, there is availability to the services to ward off threats. Now, that brings me, Admiral Sir, to my question, which is tailor-made for you. The Raksha Mantri most recently had made this announcement in the Naval Commanders Conference that over the next 5 to 10 years, the armed forces would be buying more than $100 billion worth of weapons platform. Now, are those $100 billion worth of weapons platform all going to be indigenous, as the Air Marshal was bringing out, that the Air Force needs standoff and long distance firepower to be able to engage strategic targets beyond the immediate boundary or the border? So, what all do you think would be on this buying list? Wish list is something, but what do you think will in reality translate to what is going to be bought?
Well, the present AON which has been given of $8.5 billion you mentioned, these are all long-range missiles, helicopters, artillery guns, and the electronic warfare devices. Now, I'm talking about all three services.
Okay.
Now, you know, we have two nuclear neighbors. We have to understand that. And these capabilities are created not to go to war, but to prevent a war by having enough capability so that you can deter your opponents so that they don't come and fight. And for that, you have to be as good and maybe better than the other chap. So in this list that I understand, the missiles are primarily meant for the Air Force for this standoff. Navy will also get the BrahMos. They have got about 200 BrahMos missiles. These are all replacement or some life expired. They will be taken away for technical sort of evaluation. 50 utility helicopters for the Navy. Now this is a difficult one. We have not been able to build a helicopter which has got a blade folding capability. And on the ship, the helicopters have to be parked inside the hangar for which the blades have to be folded. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do it, and therefore, there is an import option. The government rightly has not gone for import option. In the meantime, the Alouette, the Chetaks are having a very tough time, as you keep monitoring. This will probably encourage the Kamov Bureau, which is supposed to make naval utility helicopters in India, or any other company that the Navy desires or Navy finds their fit. So they will start manufacturing here, which has got the blade folding capability. So it is going to give push to indigenous first time a naval helicopter. So that is one. The second one is electronic warfare systems. We are very good at it. We have not bought electronic warfare systems for our aircraft ships for at least 25-30 years. It's all Indian, including on our aircraft. So there would be a replacement, there would be advanced
replacement from internally manufactured.
That's correct, all internal. All this 8.5 billion Maruf is all going to be made in India with Indian companies with very little foreign input, but by and large it will be all India. For example, for the army, since we don't have an army input, you are an army officer yourself, they have got about 155 millimeter 52 caliber towed artillery guns, 307 of them. This has got a history. The artillery program, day before yesterday, the standing committee in the parliament has asked as to why it is not being done. So there is a little bit of hurry. In 2011, we had a review of this, and then we had taken a call with the army that please start making the Bofor guns for which the transfer of technology has already taken place.
Okay. So yes, and I'm familiar with the fact that companies like Bharat Forge are making excellent 155 mm ATAGS guns, which under various trials and terrain conditions has even registered hits up to 48 kilometers.
That's true.
Which is far in excess of any other weapon systems of its kind in the world.
True.
I'll come back to you for another clarification, sir. Air Marshal, sir. Now, we repeatedly get told there is a negative list that keeps coming out. In fact, if you look at the history of negative lists, they come out every 6 to 8 months between 2020 and now 2022. And the negative list says that you can't buy this, you can't buy this, you can't buy this. So we have now reduced our choices for our armed forces to the barest minimum. Now here is an Air Force related question, that on one side you are buying top of the line fighters like Rafale for the Air Force. On the other side you say negative list that you have to have most things, as the admirals brought out in the 8.5 billion acquisition which has been cleared. Where does the weapon and the firepower for these new systems that the Americans are pushing hard for India to buy come from? Are we making, for example, the ammunition for Rafale, and after the use by date passes by, if we don't buy it from there, can we make it here? Can we make weapons for aircrafts more recently purchased by the Raksha Mantri from Russia after the Chinese intrusions? Can we make platforms that are missiles that can be fired from the air through helicopters with a standoff distance, when the helicopters in itself, some of them are being grounded and giving problems? So are we on one side not doing enough to keep our inventory alive. On the other side, we are trying to venture into new areas of inventory.
Marup, I'll try to throw some light on this issue. See, basically what you require, that is in line with the national interest. What is your requirement? What is your interest? Wish list can be different. Wish list can be, I want to have this, I want to have this. But can you afford whatever is constant is the funds what the government can give it to us. In the same time, within the funds, we have to have that firepower. What is your immediate requirement? The two immediate neighbors, like Sinha sir just brought out, two nuclear neighbors, Pakistan and China. So all your procurement, all your development should be keeping the specific, this thing in mind to deter them from making any attacks on us. Now coming back to the Rafale, the aircrafts were procured because we didn't have any aircrafts. LCA was getting delayed. Sufficient weapons are not able to cover on the, we got already there, sir. Like Su-30 is that force and for which the weapons are being developed. Now we cannot have, depend on the other countries. We may have a platform, but if there are no weapons, we depend on them, we will end up nowhere. So that Atmanirbharta or Indian design and development is most important because having an aircraft of 5,000, 6,000 crores, but without any armament or without missiles is of no use.
Absolutely.
So we would have to develop ourselves, and I think India is quite doing well. And the foundation was based by Sinha sir, and started off when he was looking after the PP and FD directorate, and it has progressing in the correct direction and the correct shape. We may not have that firepower, that 42 squadron or 45 squadron you are talking about, but you should have enough to deter them for making any positive attack this thing. Our procurement of this standoff weapons for Su-30 is correct in this line. And that is, I think, okay. Now, Navy, I am just put one line on the Navy because it's a vast ocean. To counter China and to stop them in Indian Ocean, we require a very powerful Navy. What government has done, given a major contribution, the 5,600 crores out of 7,500 crores, procurement of making your missile boats more effective and marine power more effective, I think in the correct direction. And what you require Air Force in initial stages, I think it should be enough, sufficient. And as a requirement basis, we have to prioritize what you require right now, what you should procure next, what you should procure next. I don't foresee any problem such that Air Force cannot produce the results.
Okay, so that's interesting and that's encouraging. Admiral sir, you have been in the integrated headquarters and traditionally we have bought equipment, a lot of equipment from the Russians. I believe in recent years, the finalization of outstanding ruble payments to Russia has been held up. And in the light of this, since Russia, despite its depleting resources because of the Ukraine conflict, is still a supplier of many important platforms to us, for example, for the Navy, the submarines, the nuclear submarines, for example, for the Air Force, the Sukhoi fighters, the MiG fighters. So, are we looking at this debate between Delhi and Moscow about rupee-ruble payment going to hamper our necessity-related needs?
My sense, Paroof, is that this hurdle should be crossed very soon, if it has not already been crossed, because the discussions are going on. The second point is that a lot of these Russian weapon systems and ammunitions are being sort of manufactured in India now because the ordnance factories and some private companies have pitched in, and a lot of particularly the dumb bombs as they call it, they are being built here. Some of the missiles we have indigenized, so we would like to have indigenous missiles fitted on them rather than buying the Russian ones. One important point is, if we have to become Atmanirbhar in every field, we have to reduce our dependence on foreign input, particularly from Russia, because we got almost 58% of our legacy as from Russians.
Question here, sir. The question is, America and its diplomatic strategic interest with India is very closely linked with America being able to sell weapon platforms to us. Now, if we are reducing it on the Russians, in the light that we'll make it in India, how are we going to answer the Americans that, sorry, we can't buy your stuff because we need to also make this in India?
No, that's a very great question, really, because the government's intention, as far as I can see, is not to have a seller-buyer relation with the US. And this has been told very clearly that we will take a call what we want. And that will have to be developed or manufactured in India. You can have your factories here, but make it in India and gradually transfer the technology over a period of time. So outright purchase, except for aerial platforms, because you know we have faltered in the past. Our aerospace has faltered in a great way because we didn't manufacture any aircraft. That's the only service which had to import aircraft. That's the platform, the main fighting.
Takes a lot of money also.
That's a lot of money. But you see, we could have developed, and you have, you know, anchored many of the programs about Marut and then Tejas, etc. You know it all, and so are your viewers. But I think that that consciousness has now come. LCA is by and large, except for the engine, we don't make engines. But I think that the Americans have understood this.
Question here.
Yeah.
The LCA engines are again very dependent on GE as a supplier in the past, and the LCA, we still don't make the engines that we need to fulfill the long order list that has come. Where lies the answer for that?
No, you're absolutely right. Just a few days back, GE has announced that it will start making 414 engines in India.
Okay.
Yeah, just a few days back, 3-4 days back. So I think that decision has been reached.
Marshall sir, you know, there is a big drive to produce electronic equipment in India, you know, like radars, EW warfare systems. Even there is a drive for producing a certain amount of technology that the Navy could do with listening systems and others for submarines. Now, my experience in talking to people has shown that the EW capability, the Indian mind is second to none. So while our HAL program of Tejas was hampered by, and let us not blame HAS entirely, HAL, because I know on 3 occasions at least, they were not given what they were promised by the Americans because the wind tunnel facilities are not here. And when our boys were there and we did a nuclear test and they were sent back, and again the clock went back by many years. But in EW, why is it that we can't be a world leader in producing electronic warfare items when we are launching satellites for the British, which is technologically have been on the forefront? So our satellite program has succeeded, our missile program has succeeded, but our electronic warfare equipment, there is still the brand that countries like Israel have in terms of providing you equipment that, oh, we have Israeli radar systems. The Sukhoi has a mix of a whole lot of systems that come from all over the world.
Maruf, absolutely right. See, as far regards that missiles, air defense, radars, or EW, or any communication systems, we had been doing quite well and progressing very gradually in this aspect. Basically, the infrastructure or the initial investment required in this aspect may not have been as much as what required in development of the aircrafts. Though LCA started off very early, Marut sir mentioned that Marutska, the things were there. We didn't learn from our mistakes and we slowed down. Wind tunnel effect we brought out, America didn't cooperate. So we should have prepared for this thing. Alternate should have been had so that LCA project, which started much earlier, would have taken off. But however, the radars has become, they are very quite effective. What radars have been developed and installed, I will not be able to cover that installed. They are very effective and very useful and much cheaper than what you procure from outside. Similarly, EW equipment, like Admiral Sinha sir was pointing out, the Shakti which had been given AOC, AON for this particular aspect in 70,500 crore is going to play a major role. This EW, we have not bought a EW system for quite some time. It being developed indigenously, developed, designed, developed and manufactured by us. So we have to take a lead and certain step has to be taken. We cannot say that we will develop aircraft also and missiles also, everything also. So now it's a step and going towards a full integration. Now the avionics, weapons, radars, EW systems are being developed by different different industries and different working out that. So that is the right step going ahead with that. Now problem of aircraft is also going ahead far. Engines are also at a problem. But I just read somewhere even the Kaveri engine is going to be successful. How it is, I am not very clear on that. If that it comes up, it will be a good step. Similarly, about that ship engine, marine engines, now clearance has been given in this DSC Council for marine. That is the first time that Indian government is taking, the Indian Navy is going to take steps toward manufacturing the marine engines. And maybe because of this initiative, slowly, gradually you can come on to the other engines.
Quick question, sir. Quick question. Amongst the Army's wish list is a dedicated satellite for the Army. Do you think that is feasible? Do you think that will provide any more advantage than what satellite information we have?
Marup, we have to understand one thing very clearly. We don't have to look after Army, Navy, Air Force. All three together has to look after the interest of this country. That has to be decided by that what is our requirement. Having a separate satellite, I don't understand. If it is there, if one satellite can serve three organizations, it is much cheaper for us. We don't have a surplus funds. We can dedicate something for that, something for that. So how is that we have to get best optimum results and best optimum output within the limited resources. That has to be worked out. But having a dedicated source, dedicated style only for Army, it is beyond my apprehension. And you may have after 20 years or 30 years when India have a surplus funds and grow financially. The best thing is to have, organize, integrate what is our requirements and how to procure them at a nominal cost. What the IDS is doing at presently and the correct decisions like even that what approvals have been given one in January and now again in the March. It is keeping the Indian country's interest and immediate requirement in the future, and we should be happy with that.
Okay, Admiral sir, last quick question to you. One of your former naval colleagues, well known in the media world for his commentaries, has often referred to the Navy as the Cinderella service. You being a naval man, the Navy now seems to be on the forefront of getting allocations for acquisitions. What is the aim of giving the Navy such a large amount of the share of money allocated when immediate needs on frontline areas are, if you talk to military men who are on the boundaries with China and Pakistan, are not entirely of a satisfactory order?
I think if you look at the capital outlay, which has been allocated this year out of our defense budget, Army's allocation is 16.32% for new acquisition. Navy is 10.96. So I think it is a fair amount because Army's consumption, Army's main requirement will be to come from revenue budget so that you can sustain. So the government has probably realized, or the Army has probably convinced the government that if we continue feeding the ammunition to the present set of equipment and weapons which are on the border, we should be able to sustain till such time we buy and induct the new ones. And that is where this 37,242 crore is there. So that will help. Navy, yes, because it is 10.96, but Navy's capital outlay, Navy has allocated 52,000 crores.
I know.
Is because of the revenue and capital, Army's revenue expenditure is much more than capital. Whereas Navy has maintained 60-40, 60% and in capital and 40%. So I think that I am sure that it has been done with the full consent of the, there will be people who will not. Navy's Cinderella service, I just want to tell you that, it's a little bit of old notion, I would say.
Okay. Okay. Yep. So at that, we'll need to end, sir. We're completely out of time. Thank you very much for your insights. And thanks to all of you for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.